The concrete floor felt cold against Bruno's belly as he pressed himself into the corner of his kennel. The sounds echoed through the animal shelter like a symphony of sadness. Dogs barking, cats meowing, and the constant shuffle of feet walking past his cage. But those feet never stopped for him. Bruno was a 3-year-old Pitbull mix with a coat the color of warm chocolate, and eyes that held more hope than any dog should need to carry. His muscular frame and broad head made people walk faster past his kennel, their eyes avoiding his gentle gaze. They saw his breed before they saw his heart. Sarah Martinez had been working at the Riverside Animal Shelter for 6 months, and she noticed patterns. Golden retrievers got adopted within days. Small fluffy dogs barely lasted a week. But Bruno had been there for 8 months, watching family after family choose someone else. Every morning, Bruno would position himself at the front of his kennel, tail wagging hopefully as potential families walked through. His whole body would wiggle with excitement, and he would do his signature trick of sitting perfectly and tilting his head to the side. It was adorable, and it broke Sarah's heart every single time. The Johnson family stopped by his kennel one Tuesday morning. Their 7-year-old daughter, Emma, immediately fell in love with Bruno's gentle demeanor. She giggled as he pressed his nose through the chain-link fence, trying to lick her fingers. But when Mr. Johnson saw the Pitbull mix sign on Bruno's cage, he quickly pulled his family away. "We need something more family-friendly," he told his wife, loud enough for Sarah to hear. Emma protested, but they were already walking toward the puppy section. Bruno's tail slowly stopped wagging. He had heard those words before. Family-friendly. Good with kids. Safe breed. The irony wasn't lost on Sarah, who had spent countless hours with Bruno and knew he was gentler than most of the family-friendly dogs in the shelter. During lunch breaks, Sarah would take Bruno to the play yard. He loved fetch but was terrible at bringing the ball back. Instead, he would run around the yard with pure joy, the tennis ball forgotten as he celebrated the simple pleasure of running free. He would roll on his back in the grass, legs flailing in the air, making Sarah laugh despite her frustration with the world's prejudices. Bruno had arrived at the shelter as a stray, found wandering the streets with a collar but no tags. He was underweight and scared but not aggressive. The shelter's behavioral assessment showed he was excellent with other dogs, cats, and children. He passed every temperament test with flying colors, yet his kennel card remained unchanged week after week. The shelter had a policy about long-term residents. After 12 months, difficult decisions had to be made. Sarah tried not to think about it, but the calendar on her desk reminded her daily. Bruno had 4 months left. Other staff members had grown attached to Bruno too. Mike, the maintenance worker, always saved the best treats for him. Dr. Patricia Williams, the shelter veterinarian, would spend extra time during Bruno's checkups, scratching behind his ears and talking to him in the gentle voice reserved for her favorite patients. "He's special," Dr. Williams told Sarah one afternoon. "I've been doing this for 15 years, and I can tell when a dog has that something extra. Bruno has it. He just needs the right person to see it." The right person seemed like a myth at this point. Sarah had started a social media campaign for Bruno, posting photos and videos of his daily activities. The posts got likes and shares, but no serious inquiries. Comments ranged from supportive to heartbreaking. Some people shared their own Pitbull stories, praising the breed's loyalty and gentleness. Others warned about insurance policies and neighborhood restrictions. One video went particularly viral. Sarah had filmed Bruno during a thunderstorm, showing how he comforted a scared kitten that had been brought to the shelter that day. Bruno had gently laid down next to the kitten's carrier, his presence somehow calming the tiny creature. The video accumulated thousands of views and hundreds of comments, but still no adoption applications. As autumn turned to winter, Bruno's situation became more desperate. The shelter was overcrowded and space was at a premium. Sarah found herself staying late, spending extra time with Bruno, knowing that each day could be one of his last chances. Bruno seemed to sense the change in atmosphere. His morning enthusiasm dimmed slightly, though he never gave up completely. He would still wag his tail when Sarah approached, still try to make friends with every person who passed by. His resilience was both inspiring and heartbreaking. The shelter organized special adoption events, hoping to find homes for their long-term residents. Bruno was always the star of these events, dressed in a festive bandana and showing off his best behavior. Children would gravitate toward him, drawn by his patient demeanor and gentle nature. But parents would read his breed information and politely decline. Sarah started having dreams about Bruno. In them, he was running through fields with a loving family, finally free from the concrete walls and chain-link fences that had defined his world for so long. She would wake up hoping that today would be the day, that someone would finally see past the labels and stereotypes to the incredible dog underneath. During quiet moments, Sarah would sit with Bruno in his kennel, both of them watching the world go by through the small window. Bruno would rest his head on her lap and she could feel his complete trust in her. It was a responsibility that weighed heavily on her shoulders. The winter days grew shorter, and Bruno's time grew limited. Sarah refused to give up hope, but she also began preparing for the possibility that Bruno might never find his forever home. The thought of losing him was unbearable, but the reality of shelter life was harsh and unforgiving. As December approached, Sarah made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't save every dog, but maybe she could save this one. Maybe Bruno's story didn't have to end in tragedy. Maybe, just maybe, the right person was still out there waiting to meet the most wonderful dog they never knew they needed. 300 miles away in the small town of Millbrook, Marcus Thompson was struggling with his own kind of loneliness. At 68, he had been living alone for 2 years since his wife Helen passed away from cancer. Their old Victorian house felt too big, too quiet, and too full of memories. Marcus had retired from his job as a high school history teacher the year before Helen died. They had planned to travel, to finally visit all those places they had talked about for 40 years of marriage. Instead, Marcus found himself rattling around an empty house, wondering what to do with the rest of his life. His daughter Jessica called every few days, worried about his isolation. She lived in California with her own family, and constantly urged him to move closer to them. But Marcus couldn't imagine leaving the home he and Helen had shared, the garden she had loved, or the community where they had built their life together. Marcus had never considered himself a dog person. Helen had always wanted a pet, but their busy lives teaching and raising Jessica had never seemed to allow time for the responsibility of a dog. Now, with too much time on his hands, Marcus found himself thinking about Helen's old wish. The idea started small. Maybe a companion would help with the silence. Maybe having something to care for would give him purpose again. But every time he considered it seriously, doubt crept in. At his age, was it fair to get a puppy that might outlive him? Was he too set in his ways to adjust to life with a pet? Dr. Rebecca Chen, Marcus's physician, had been encouraging him to find activities that would get him out of the house. During his last checkup, she had mentioned that pet ownership often improved mental health in seniors. The conversation planted a seed that grew stronger each day. Marcus began researching dog breeds online, something that would have amused Helen. He had always been skeptical of technology, but Jessica had set up a computer for him, and he was slowly learning to navigate the internet. He read about temperaments, exercise needs, and lifespans, trying to find the perfect match for a senior citizen's lifestyle. The breed research led him down an unexpected path. Everything he read about Pitbull-type dogs contradicted the stories he had heard on the news. Articles about their loyalty, intelligence, and gentle nature with families surprised him. He learned about breed discrimination and how media bias had created fear around dogs that were once known as nanny dogs for their protective nature with children. One cold December evening, Marcus was browsing local animal shelter websites, not really planning to adopt but curious about what dogs were available. That's when he saw Bruno's profile on the Riverside Animal Shelter page. The photo showed a handsome brown dog with soulful eyes, sitting perfectly in what looked like a play yard. The description was heartbreaking. Bruno has been with us for 9 months. He's excellent with children, other dogs, and cats. He knows basic commands and loves to play fetch. Bruno is looking for a patient family who will see past breed stereotypes to the loving companion he truly is. Marcus stared at the photo for a long time. Something about Bruno's expression reminded him of his old students. The ones who sat in the back of the classroom, ignored by their peers but full of potential if someone just gave them a chance. He had made a career of seeing past surfaces to find the person underneath. The next morning, Marcus surprised himself by calling the shelter. Sarah answered the phone, and her enthusiasm when he asked about Bruno was immediate and genuine. She talked for 20 minutes about Bruno's personality, his quirks, his favorite activities, and his heartbreaking situation. He's been here longer than any dog should be, Sarah explained. People see his breed and make assumptions. But Marcus, I've worked with hundreds of dogs, and Bruno is special. He's patient, gentle, and incredibly intuitive. He seems to know when someone needs comfort. Marcus found himself agreeing to visit, though he warned Sarah he was just looking. The drive to Riverside would take him 3 hours, but he had nowhere else to be. For the first time in months, he felt a flutter of anticipation about something. Sarah spent the weekend preparing for Marcus's visit. She made sure Bruno had a bath and brushing, not that he needed much improvement. She had a good feeling about this potential match, though she tried not to get her hopes up too high. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. Marcus made the drive slowly, stopping twice for coffee and once just to walk around and calm his nerves. He kept questioning his decision. What did he know about caring for a dog? What if Bruno didn't like him? What if he was making a terrible mistake? When Marcus walked into the shelter, Sarah greeted him warmly. She led him through the adoption process paperwork first, explaining the shelter's policies and procedures. Then came the moment they had both been anticipating. Bruno was in the indoor playroom when Sarah brought Marcus to meet him. The dog was lying quietly on a blanket, but his ears perked up when the door opened. He stood slowly, tail wagging cautiously, as if he had learned not to get too excited about visitors. Marcus knelt down, extending his hand for Bruno to sniff. The dog approached carefully, his whole body wiggling slightly with controlled excitement. When Bruno gently licked Marcus's hand, something shifted in the older man's chest. A warmth he hadn't felt in 2 years spread through him. "Hello there, buddy," Marcus said softly. Bruno sat and tilted his head, studying Marcus's face with those intelligent brown eyes. There was something almost human in that gaze, a recognition that passed between them. They spent an hour together in the playroom. Bruno showed off his perfect sit, his enthusiastic but terrible fetch skills, and his favorite trick of rolling over for belly rubs. Marcus found himself laughing for the first time in months as Bruno wiggled on his back, legs flailing happily in the air. "He likes you," Sarah observed from the doorway. "Bruno is usually more reserved with strangers. He's being himself with you, which is rare." As they prepared to leave the playroom, Bruno did something that surprised everyone. He walked over to Marcus and simply leaned against his leg, resting his full weight against the older man. It was a gesture of complete trust and affection that brought tears to Marcus's eyes. "I'll take him," Marcus said quietly. "When can he come home?" Sarah's eyes filled with tears of joy. After 9 months of watching Bruno wait, she was finally seeing his Christmas miracle unfold. The paperwork would take a few days, but Bruno had found his person at last. The 3 days between Marcus's visit and Bruno's adoption felt like the longest in both their lives. Marcus found himself shopping for dog supplies with an enthusiasm that surprised him. He bought a comfortable bed, food and water bowls, a collar and leash, and enough toys to entertain a pack of dogs. Helen's old gardening shed got converted into a storage space for Bruno's things. As Marcus organized everything, he caught himself talking to Helen's photo on the kitchen counter. "I think you would have loved him, sweetheart. He has kind eyes, just like you always said you wanted in a dog." At the shelter, Sarah kept checking on Bruno every few hours. The dog seemed to sense that something had changed. He was more alert, more hopeful, spending time at the front of his kennel instead of hiding in the back corner. Other staff members stopped by to say goodbye to their long-term resident. "You're going to miss him," Dr. Williams commented, finding Sarah sitting in Bruno's kennel during her lunch break. "I'm going to miss him terribly," Sarah admitted, "but I'm so happy for him. Marcus seems like exactly what Bruno needs, and I think Bruno might be exactly what Marcus needs too." The night before the adoption, Sarah stayed late to spend extra time with Bruno. She wanted to tell him about his new life, about the man who had chosen him when no one else would. Bruno seemed to understand, resting his head in her lap while she scratched behind his ears. "You're going to have a big house with a yard," she whispered, "and Marcus is going to love you so much. You won't have to worry about being ignored anymore." Meanwhile, Marcus was having his own conversation with Bruno's photo on his phone. He had asked Sarah to email him several pictures, and he found himself looking at them constantly. His neighbor, Mrs. Patterson, noticed him studying his phone during their usual morning chat over the fence. "That's a handsome dog," she observed. "When are you bringing him home?" "Tomorrow," Marcus replied, still amazed by his own words. "His name is Bruno." Mrs. Patterson smiled knowingly. "Helen would be proud of you for opening your heart again." The adoption day arrived with bright winter sunshine. Marcus arrived at the shelter an hour early, too excited to wait any longer. Sarah met him with Bruno already on a leash, the dog's tail wagging with barely contained excitement. Bruno remembered Marcus immediately, pressing against his legs in greeting. The paperwork was finalized quickly. Sarah had prepared a folder with Bruno's medical records, feeding instructions, and training tips. She also included a handwritten note about Bruno's favorite activities and quirks. "He loves car rides," Sarah explained as they walked toward the parking lot. "He'll probably want to stick his head out the window, but he's good about staying in the back seat. And he's excellent on a leash, though he does like to stop and sniff everything." Loading Bruno into Marcus's car was an adventure. The dog had never seen such a spacious vehicle and wasn't sure what to make of it. With Sarah's help and plenty of encouragement, Bruno finally jumped into the back seat. He immediately pressed his nose to the window, watching the shelter fade away as they drove off. The 3-hour drive home gave Marcus and Bruno time to get used to each other. Bruno was an excellent travel companion, content to watch the scenery and occasionally leaning forward to sniff Marcus's shoulder. When they stopped for gas, people smiled at the sight of the elderly man and his gentle giant sharing a car. "Is he friendly?" a little girl asked at the gas station, her mother hovering nervously nearby. "Very friendly," Marcus assured them. "His name is Bruno." The girl petted Bruno through the open window while her mother gradually relaxed, seeing how gentle the dog was with her daughter. As they pulled into the driveway of Marcus's Victorian house, Bruno's excitement was palpable. His tail wagged furiously as he took in the sights and smells of his new neighborhood. Children were playing in the park across the street, and Bruno's ears perked up at their laughter. The house tour was extensive. Bruno investigated every room, sniffing corners and getting familiar with his new territory. He showed particular interest in Helen's old reading chair by the fireplace, circling it several times before settling down on the rug nearby. "That was Helen's favorite spot," Marcus explained. "I think she would have liked you claiming it as yours too." The first night was an adjustment for both of them. Marcus had set up Bruno's bed in the living room, but the dog seemed restless. Around midnight, Marcus heard gentle whining from downstairs. He found Bruno sitting by the front door, not trying to escape but clearly uncomfortable. "What's wrong, boy?" Marcus asked softly. Bruno looked up at him with those expressive eyes and whined again. It dawned on Marcus that after 9 months in a noisy shelter, the complete silence of the house might be unsettling for Bruno. Marcus brought his own pillow and blanket downstairs, settling onto the couch near Bruno's bed. The dog immediately relaxed, comforted by Marcus's presence. They both slept better than either had in months. The next morning brought their first real test, the neighborhood walk. Marcus had been somewhat sedentary since Helen's death, but Bruno clearly needed exercise. Armed with treats and plenty of patience, they set out to explore the neighborhood. Bruno's leash manners were impeccable, just as Sarah had promised. He walked calmly beside Marcus, stopping to investigate interesting smells but never pulling or misbehaving. Several neighbors came out to meet them, curious about Marcus's new companion. "What a beautiful dog," commented Mr. Rodriguez from 2 houses down. "What breed is he?" Marcus felt a moment of nervousness before answering. "He's a Pitbull mix. His name is Bruno." He watched Mr. Rodriguez's face carefully, ready to defend his new friend if necessary. "Pitbulls are wonderful dogs," Mr. Rodriguez replied, much to Marcus's surprise. "My brother has one. They're incredibly loyal." He knelt down to pet Bruno, who responded with gentle tail wags and a careful attempt to lick his hand. By the end of the first week, Marcus and Bruno had established their routine. Morning walks around the neighborhood, breakfast together in the kitchen, afternoon naps in the living room with Bruno on his bed and Marcus in Helen's chair. Evening walks were longer, sometimes including trips to the local park where Bruno could run free in the fenced dog area. Bruno's presence transformed the house. The silence that had oppressed Marcus for 2 years was replaced by the gentle sounds of companionship. Bruno's breathing while he slept, the click of his nails on the hardwood floors, the jingle of his collar tags. These sounds filled the emptiness that had consumed Marcus since Helen's death. The dog seemed to understand Marcus's grief instinctively. On difficult days, when memories of Helen brought tears to Marcus's eyes, Bruno would quietly approach and rest his head on Marcus's lap. No judgment, no questions, just silent support that somehow made the pain more bearable. Marcus found himself talking to Bruno constantly, sharing stories about Helen, discussing his plans for the day, even reading aloud from the newspaper. Bruno listened attentively, his head tilted in that endearing way that made Marcus feel heard and understood. 2 weeks after the adoption, Marcus called Sarah to give her an update. His voice was lighter than it had been in years as he described Bruno's integration into his life. "He's perfect," Marcus told her. "I can't imagine why no one wanted him. He's brought so much joy back into my life." Sarah smiled through her tears of happiness. "I think you two were meant for each other," she said. "Thank you for seeing what everyone else missed." Spring arrived early in Millbrook, and with it came new challenges and discoveries for Marcus and Bruno. The neighborhood kids were out of school for spring break, and Bruno's gentle nature quickly made him a favorite among the children. What started as cautious curiosity from parents became warm acceptance as they witnessed Bruno's patient interactions with their kids. 8-year-old Emma Reyes lived next door and had been watching Bruno through her bedroom window since he arrived. Her mother, Carmen, had initially been nervous about the large dog next door, but she couldn't ignore how well-behaved and calm Bruno appeared during his daily walks with Marcus. The breakthrough came on a Wednesday afternoon when Emma's ball accidentally rolled into Marcus's yard. Instead of asking her mother to retrieve it, Emma approached the fence where Marcus and Bruno were sitting in the garden. Bruno immediately noticed the little girl and approached the fence, tail wagging gently. "Hi, doggy," Emma said softly, her small fingers reaching through the chain link to pet Bruno's nose. "You're really pretty." Marcus watched carefully as Bruno responded to Emma's attention. The dog seemed to understand he was interacting with a child, his movements becoming even more gentle and deliberate. When Emma's ball rolled closer to the fence, Bruno carefully picked it up in his mouth and dropped it near her. "Mom, the dog brought me my ball," Emma called excitedly. Carmen hurried over, ready to intervene if necessary, but stopped when she saw the tender interaction between her daughter and the supposedly dangerous Pitbull. "His name is Bruno," Marcus explained, noticing Carmen's surprised expression. "He loves children. Would Emma like to meet him properly?" What followed was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. With Carmen's nervous but growing approval, Emma began visiting Marcus and Bruno regularly. She would help Marcus with simple garden tasks while Bruno supervised, always staying close to ensure everyone was safe and happy. Bruno seemed to understand his role as Emma's protector instinctively. When she climbed on the garden fence, he positioned himself underneath to catch her if she fell. When she ran too close to the street during their yard games, he would gently herd her back towards safety. Carmen found herself relaxing more each day, as she witnessed Bruno's natural guardian instincts in action. The local elementary school was planning their annual spring festival, and Emma had an idea that would change everything for Bruno and Marcus. She approached Marcus one afternoon with the excitement that only an 8-year-old could muster. "Mr. Marcus, can Bruno come to our school festival? Mrs. Johnson said they want to have a pet show, and Bruno is the best dog ever." Marcus felt a familiar flutter of anxiety. While their neighborhood had accepted Bruno, a school full of children and parents was a different challenge entirely. What if someone was afraid? What if Bruno was rejected again? But looking at Emma's hopeful face and Bruno's trusting eyes, Marcus knew he couldn't let fear win. "Let me talk to your teacher," Marcus said carefully. "We'll see what we can do." The conversation with Mrs. Johnson, Emma's teacher, went better than expected. She explained that the school was looking for well-behaved pets to participate in their educational pet show. Children would learn about different animals and responsible pet ownership. After meeting Bruno in person and seeing his calm demeanor, Mrs. Johnson enthusiastically invited them to participate. The week before the festival, Marcus and Bruno practiced their presentation. Marcus had decided to focus on responsible pet ownership and the importance of looking beyond breed stereotypes. Bruno would demonstrate basic commands and show off his gentle nature with the children. "We're going to show them what a real pit bull is like," Marcus told Bruno during one of their practice sessions. "Not the scary stories they might have heard, but the truth about dogs like you." Festival day arrived with perfect spring weather. Marcus dressed in his best shirt and tie, while Bruno wore a new collar with a bow tie that Emma had picked out especially for the occasion. As they walked onto the school grounds, Marcus felt a mix of pride and nervousness. The pet show was set up in the school gymnasium, with different stations for various animals. There were rabbits, hamsters, a few cats, and several dogs. Bruno was by far the largest dog there, and Marcus noticed some parents pointing and whispering as they approached. Mrs. Johnson introduced Marcus and Bruno to the assembled crowd of children and parents. "This is Mr. Thompson and his dog Bruno. They're going to teach us about responsible pet ownership and show us that sometimes our ideas about different dog breeds might not be accurate." Marcus began his presentation with Bruno sitting perfectly beside him. He talked about how he had adopted Bruno from a shelter, how the dog had been overlooked because of prejudices about his breed, and how Bruno had become the perfect companion for a senior citizen living alone. "Bruno knows many commands," Marcus explained, "but more importantly, he knows how to be gentle and kind." As if on cue, Bruno demonstrated sit, stay, down, and shake hands. The children were impressed, but the real magic happened when Mrs. Johnson invited them to meet Bruno personally. One by one, children approached cautiously. Bruno seemed to understand the importance of this moment. He sat perfectly still, allowing small hands to pet his head and scratch behind his ears. His tail wagged gently, but he never jumped or moved suddenly. When a shy kindergartner dropped his toy car near Bruno's feet, the dog carefully picked it up and handed it back to the child. The transformation in the room was visible. Parents who had seemed nervous began smiling as they watched their children interact safely with Bruno. Several asked Marcus questions about Pitbulls, genuinely curious about the breed after seeing Bruno's gentle behavior. The highlight came when a little boy with autism, who had been overwhelmed by the noise and activity of the festival, found comfort sitting quietly beside Bruno. The dog seemed to sense the child's need for calm and simply lay down next to him, providing silent companionship until the boy felt ready to rejoin the activities. "I've never seen anything like it," the boy's mother told Marcus later. "Tyler doesn't usually connect with animals, but Bruno seemed to understand exactly what he needed." By the end of the festival, Bruno had won over every person in the gymnasium. Children were asking their parents if they could adopt pit bulls, and several parents were inquiring about the shelter where Marcus had found Bruno. Mrs. Johnson asked if Marcus and Bruno would consider becoming regular classroom visitors for their character education program. The drive home was quiet, but the satisfaction Marcus felt was immense. Bruno seemed tired but content, his head resting on Marcus's shoulder as they navigated the familiar streets back to their house. That evening, as they sat in their usual spots in the living room, Marcus reflected on how far they had both come. "You know what, Bruno? I think we make a pretty good team." Bruno's response was to get up from his bed and, for the first time since arriving at Marcus's house, jump onto the couch beside his human. Marcus didn't have the heart to tell him dogs weren't supposed to be on the furniture. Instead, he simply scratched Bruno's ears and enjoyed the companionship. The festival had been more than just a successful presentation. It had been Bruno's introduction to his community as a valued member, rather than a feared outsider. For Marcus, it had been a reminder that taking chances and standing up for what's right could lead to unexpected joy. As spring turned toward summer, Marcus found himself looking forward to each day in a way he hadn't since Helen's death. Bruno had given him purpose, companionship, and a reason to engage with the world again. In return, Marcus had given Bruno something even more precious, a chance to prove that love and acceptance could overcome prejudice and fear. Their story was just beginning, but already it was changing hearts and minds throughout their small community. One gentle interaction at a time, Bruno was showing the world that the most important thing about any dog isn't their breed, but the size of their heart. Summer brought longer days and new adventures for Marcus and Bruno. Their morning walks extended into hiking trips at the local nature preserve, where Bruno could explore off-leash in the designated dog areas. Marcus discovered muscles he had forgotten he had, but the joy of watching Bruno run free through the woods made every ache worthwhile. It was during one of these hiking trips that they encountered their biggest challenge yet. Marcus and Bruno were walking along a familiar trail when they heard frantic barking from up ahead. Around the bend, they found a distressed woman calling for help. Her small terrier mix, Daisy, had fallen into a steep ravine while chasing a squirrel. "I can't reach her," the woman cried, pointing down into the rocky crevice where they could hear Daisy whimpering. "She's hurt and scared, and I don't know what to do." Marcus assessed the situation quickly. The ravine was about 8 feet deep with steep, rocky sides, too dangerous for humans to navigate safely, but possibly manageable for a sure-footed dog. He looked at Bruno, who was already showing signs of understanding the emergency. "Bruno, can you help?" Marcus asked, pointing toward the ravine. Without hesitation, Bruno carefully picked his way down the rocky slope, his muscular build and natural agility serving him well. What happened next amazed both Marcus and the woman, whose name was Linda. Bruno approached the injured Daisy with incredible gentleness, sniffing her carefully to assess her condition. The small dog was frightened but seemed to understand that Bruno was there to help. Bruno carefully positioned himself so that Daisy could climb onto his back, then slowly and methodically carried her up the ravine slope. "Oh my God," Linda whispered as Bruno emerged with Daisy clinging to his neck. "I can't believe he did that." Daisy had a sprained leg but was otherwise unharmed. Linda was overcome with gratitude, insisting on getting Bruno a special treat from the park's snack bar. As they walked back together, she peppered Marcus with questions about Bruno's breed and training. "I'll be honest," Linda admitted. "When I first saw him, I was a little nervous. You hear so many stories about Pitbulls, but what he just did, that was pure heroism. Daisy could have died down there if Bruno hadn't helped." Word of Bruno's rescue spread quickly through the hiking community. The park ranger, Tom Fletcher, heard the story and was so impressed that he asked Marcus if Bruno might be interested in training as a volunteer search and rescue dog. "We've been looking for dogs with the right temperament," Tom explained. "Bruno showed intelligence, physical ability, and most importantly, the instinct to help others in distress. Those are rare qualities." Marcus was intrigued but uncertain. At 68, was he too old to take on such a responsibility? And was Bruno ready for that level of training and commitment? They discussed it that evening in their usual spot on the couch. "What do you think, boy? Want to become an official hero?" Bruno's response was to rest his head on Marcus's lap and look up at him with those trusting eyes that had become so familiar. Marcus took that as a yes. The search and rescue training was more intensive than either of them had expected. 3 times a week they drove to the training facility where Bruno learned to track scents, navigate difficult terrain, and signal when he found someone. Marcus learned emergency first aid, communication protocols, and how to work as part of a coordinated rescue team. Bruno excelled at the training, his intelligence and eagerness to please making him a star pupil. The other handlers, initially skeptical about bringing a Pitbull into their program, quickly became Bruno's biggest supporters as they witnessed his dedication and natural ability. "He's got the best nose in the class," reported Katie Martinez, the lead trainer. "And his temperament is perfect for this work. Calm under pressure, gentle with victims, but determined enough to work through difficult conditions." The training also brought unexpected benefits for Marcus. Working alongside other volunteers, most of them decades younger, reinvigorated his sense of purpose and community. He found himself making new friendships and feeling more connected to his community than he had in years. Jessica called one evening while Marcus was studying search and rescue protocols. She had been worried about her father since her mother's death, but the change in his voice was remarkable. "Dad, you sound happier than you have in years," she observed. "This whole thing with Bruno has been amazing for you." "He saved my life, Jess," Marcus replied simply. "I was just existing before Bruno came along. Now I feel like I'm living again." Bruno's first official rescue call came on a rainy Tuesday evening in late July. A 6-year-old boy named Tommy had wandered away from a family camping trip and had been missing for 4 hours. The local police had called in the volunteer search and rescue team, and Marcus and Bruno were assigned to search a section of dense woods near the campground. The conditions were challenging. Rain made tracking difficult and the thick undergrowth slowed their progress. But Bruno seemed energized by the real-world application of his training. He worked methodically, nose to the ground, following scent trails that were invisible to Marcus. After 2 hours of searching, Bruno suddenly stopped and began barking in the specific pattern they had practiced during training. Marcus's heart raced as he followed Bruno deeper into the woods, using his flashlight to navigate the dark terrain. They found Tommy huddled under a fallen tree, cold and scared but unharmed. He had been trying to stay dry and had fallen asleep, which explained why earlier searchers hadn't heard him calling for help. "Are you Tommy?" Marcus asked gently, kneeling down to the boy's level. The child nodded, tears streaming down his muddy face. Bruno immediately lay down next to Tommy, providing warmth and comfort while Marcus radioed their location to the command center. The boy's fear melted away as he buried his face in Bruno's soft fur. "Is this your dog?" Tommy asked, his voice still shaky but no longer panicked. "This is Bruno," Marcus explained, wrapping his emergency blanket around the boy. "He's been looking for you. He's very good at finding people." The reunion with Tommy's parents was emotional. His mother couldn't stop thanking Marcus and Bruno, while his father shook Marcus's hand repeatedly, too overcome to speak coherently. Tommy insisted on hugging Bruno goodbye, whispering something in the dog's ear that made his tail wag. The local newspaper picked up the story, running a front-page article about the unlikely search and rescue team. The headline read, "Shelter Dog Saves the Day. Pitbull Proves Heroes Come in All Forms." The article included photos of Marcus and Bruno at the training facility and quotes from the rescued boy's family. "I was scared until the big doggy found me," Tommy was quoted as saying. "He was warm and nice, and he stayed with me until his daddy came." The positive media attention was overwhelming. Marcus found himself fielding calls from other newspapers, radio stations, and even a regional television news program. More importantly, the shelter where Sarah worked reported a significant increase in inquiries about Pitbull-type dogs. Sarah called Marcus personally to thank him for the positive representation of the breed. "You and Bruno are changing minds," she told him. "We've had 5 Pitbulls adopted since that article came out. People are finally seeing past the stereotypes." Bruno seemed to understand the importance of his role as an ambassador for his breed. During public appearances at schools and community events, he was always on his best behavior, demonstrating the gentle, intelligent nature that made pit bulls such wonderful companions when properly cared for. The summer rescue was followed by 2 more successful searches before autumn arrived. Each time, Bruno's skill and dedication impressed both the professional emergency responders and the families they helped. Marcus found himself becoming something of a local celebrity, though he always made sure the focus remained on Bruno's achievements. Dr. Williams, Bruno's veterinarian from the shelter, attended one of their public demonstrations and was amazed by the transformation in the dog she had once worried would never find a home. "When I see Bruno now, confident and purposeful and surrounded by people who love him, I can barely remember that scared dog we almost lost," she told Marcus. "You didn't just save his life. You helped him discover his true calling." As October arrived and the leaves began to change, Marcus reflected on the incredible year they had shared. Bruno had gone from an overlooked shelter dog to a certified search and rescue hero. More importantly, he had become living proof that love, patience, and opportunity could transform any life. Their evening routine remained the same. Marcus in Helen's chair, Bruno on the couch beside him, both of them content in their companionship. But now their quiet moments were filled with the satisfaction of knowing they were making a difference in their community and beyond. "You know what, Bruno?" Marcus said one evening as they watched the sunset through the living room window. "I think Helen would be proud of both of us. We've taken something broken and made it beautiful." Bruno's response was to rest his paw on Marcus's hand, a gesture that had become their private signal of affection and understanding. They had found in each other exactly what they needed: purpose, companionship, and the chance to prove that second chances could lead to extraordinary things. The boy who had been ignored at the shelter was now a hero. The lonely widower had become a vital member of his community. Together they had created a story that would inspire others to look beyond surfaces and see the potential for greatness in the most unexpected places. Winter brought unexpected challenges that would test the bond between Marcus and Bruno in ways they never anticipated. It started with Marcus's routine checkup in November, which revealed irregularities in his heart rhythm that required immediate attention. Dr. Chen referred Marcus to a cardiologist, Dr. James Morrison, who recommended a minor surgical procedure to correct the arrhythmia. The surgery was scheduled for early December, requiring Marcus to stay in the hospital for 3 days. "What about Bruno?" was Marcus's first question, his concern for his companion outweighing his worry about his own health. Jessica offered to fly in from California to help, but Marcus was reluctant to disrupt her family's holiday plans. The solution came from an unexpected source. Emma Reyes, now 9 years old and Bruno's devoted friend, convinced her mother Carmen to let Bruno stay with their family during Marcus's hospitalization. "Bruno saved Mr. Marcus from being sad," Emma argued with the logic that only children possess. Now we need to save Bruno from being sad while Mr. Marcus gets better. Carmen agreed, though she admitted to being nervous about caring for such a large dog for 3 days. Bruno had visited their house many times, but this would be his first overnight stay anywhere other than Marcus's home. The night before the surgery, Marcus sat with Bruno in their living room, trying to explain what was going to happen. Bruno seemed to sense something was different, staying closer to Marcus than usual and showing signs of anxiety. "I'm going to be gone for a few days," Marcus explained softly, scratching Bruno's ears. "But Emma and her family are going to take care of you, and then I'll come home, and we'll be together again." Bruno whined softly, resting his head on Marcus's lap with an expression of concern that broke the older man's heart. The depth of their connection had become so strong that Bruno could read Marcus's emotions and respond accordingly. The morning of the surgery, Carmen and Emma came to collect Bruno. The dog was reluctant to leave Marcus, seeming to understand that this separation was different from their usual daily routine. Marcus had to fight back tears as he watched Bruno look back at him from the Reyes family's car. At the hospital, Marcus found himself worrying more about Bruno than about his own upcoming procedure. Dr. Morrison assured him that the surgery was routine and low risk, but Marcus's concerns weren't medical. He was worried about Bruno's emotional state during their separation. Meanwhile, at the Reyes house, Bruno was struggling with the absence of his beloved human. He ate reluctantly, spent most of his time looking out the window toward Marcus's house, and seemed generally despondent despite Emma's best efforts to cheer him up. "He misses Mr. Marcus," Emma reported to her mother with the seriousness of a medical professional. "We need to help him feel better." Carmen found herself impressed by Bruno's loyalty and depth of feeling. She had grown to appreciate the dog over the months of his friendship with Emma, but seeing his genuine grief over Marcus's absence gave her new respect for the emotional capacity of dogs, particularly this gentle giant who had become part of their extended family. The surgery went smoothly, but Marcus's recovery was complicated by his worry about Bruno. The nurses found him frequently staring out his hospital room window in the direction of his neighborhood, clearly preoccupied with thoughts of home. Dr. Morrison made an unusual decision on the second day. After consulting with the hospital administration, he arranged for a brief visit from Bruno. Carmen brought the dog to the hospital parking lot, where Marcus could see him through his window and Bruno could see his human was safe. The reunion, even from a distance, was emotional for both of them. Bruno's tail wagged frantically when he spotted Marcus in the window, and Marcus felt his heart rate stabilize in a way that had nothing to do with the medical treatment he was receiving. "That dog is better medicine than anything we can prescribe," one of the nurses observed, watching the interaction from the hallway. When Marcus finally came home on the third day, Bruno's joy was overwhelming. The dog couldn't contain his excitement, jumping and spinning in circles while staying carefully gentle with his recovering human. Marcus sat down immediately so Bruno could properly greet him, and the dog spent several minutes just pressed against Marcus's side, as if reassuring himself that his person was really home. The experience had taught them both something important about the depth of their connection. Marcus realized that Bruno wasn't just his companion but his family, deserving of the same consideration and care he would give to any loved one. Bruno had learned that temporary separations didn't mean permanent abandonment, but his obvious relief at Marcus's return showed how deeply he had worried. Recovery from the surgery went faster than expected, partly because Bruno seemed to understand that Marcus needed to take things slowly. Their walks became shorter and more leisurely, their playtime gentler, and Bruno positioned himself as a constant, comforting presence during Marcus's healing process. Christmas arrived with Marcus feeling stronger than he had in months. Jessica did fly in for the holidays, bringing her husband David and their 2 teenage children. Meeting Bruno was high on their priority list, and the dog didn't disappoint. "Dad, he's incredible," Jessica said, watching Bruno patiently allow her 15-year-old son to practice dog training commands with him. "I can see why you love him so much." David, who had been skeptical about his father-in-law's decision to adopt a Pitbull, was won over within hours. "He's like a gentle giant," he told Marcus. "I had no idea dogs could be so intuitive about human emotions." The grandchildren were fascinated by Bruno's search and rescue training. Marcus demonstrated some of Bruno's skills in the backyard, hiding treats and toys for the dog to find. Bruno performed flawlessly, showing off for his extended family with obvious pride. On Christmas morning, Bruno received his own stocking full of toys and treats. But his favorite gift was a new collar with the engraved tag that read, Bruno Thompson Hero Dog. Marcus had officially changed Bruno's last name to match his own, making their family status official. The biggest surprise came when Jessica pulled Marcus aside for a private conversation. "Dad, I've been thinking about Mom a lot this week, watching you with Bruno. I think she would have loved him, but more importantly, I think she would have loved seeing you happy again." "Bruno saved me, Jess," Marcus replied simply. "I was lost after your mother died, and I didn't even realize how lost until Bruno showed me what living could feel like again." The winter months that followed were peaceful and content. Marcus's health stabilized, and their search and rescue work continued with 3 more successful missions. Bruno's reputation as a hero dog grew throughout the region, but he remained the same gentle, loving companion at home. Their routine evolved to include regular visits from Emma, who had become like a granddaughter to Marcus and a little sister to Bruno. Carmen often joked that she had adopted both of them, as they had become such a regular part of her family's life. As winter turned toward spring, Marcus began planning their first anniversary celebration, 1 year since Bruno had come home with him, transforming both their lives in ways neither could have imagined. They had gone from being 2 lonely souls to being a family, proving that love and patience could overcome any obstacle. The anniversary would mark not just Bruno's rescue from the shelter, but Marcus's rescue from grief and isolation. They had saved each other, and in doing so, had created something beautiful that extended far beyond their own lives to touch their entire community. Looking back on the year, Marcus marveled at how a dog that no one wanted had become everyone's hero. Bruno had shown them all that the most important qualities in any being had nothing to do with breed or appearance, but everything to do with the size of their heart and their capacity for love. The first anniversary of Bruno's adoption arrived with spring flowers blooming in Marcus's garden and a sense of completion that both man and dog could feel. Marcus had planned a special celebration, but the day brought an unexpected surprise that would create their most meaningful memory yet. Sarah from the Riverside Animal Shelter called that morning with news that made Marcus's heart skip a beat. A local television station wanted to feature Bruno's story as part of a segment about successful shelter adoptions. They planned to film at both the shelter and Marcus's home, showing Bruno's journey from overlooked shelter dog to community hero. "They want to focus on how adoption changed both your lives," Sarah explained, "and they're hoping the story will encourage more people to consider older dogs and misunderstood breeds." Marcus agreed immediately, knowing that Bruno's story could help other dogs still waiting in shelters for their own second chances. The timing felt perfect, as if the universe was giving them a platform to share their message of hope and transformation. The television crew arrived that afternoon, led by reporter Amanda Chen, a young woman whose warm demeanor immediately put both Marcus and Bruno at ease. She had done her homework, understanding the deeper significance of their story beyond just a simple adoption tale. "This isn't just about a man and his dog," Amanda explained as they set up for filming. "It's about overcoming prejudice, finding purpose after loss, and the incredible capacity for change that exists in all of us." The filming began in Marcus's living room, with Bruno demonstrating the same calm confidence he showed during their search and rescue work. Amanda asked thoughtful questions about Marcus's grief after Helen's death, his initial hesitation about adopting a dog, and the specific challenges they faced with Bruno's breed. "I'll be honest," Marcus told the camera, with Bruno sitting loyally beside him. "I almost didn't adopt him because of what other people had told me about Pitbulls. I'm ashamed to admit that I let fear and prejudice influence my thinking, even briefly." Bruno seemed to understand the importance of the interview, remaining perfectly still except for the occasional gentle tail wag when Marcus spoke about their adventures together. When Amanda asked Marcus to demonstrate some of Bruno's search and rescue skills, the dog performed flawlessly, his pride in his abilities evident to everyone watching. The most emotional moment came when Amanda asked Marcus what he would say to people who were afraid of pit bulls or considering surrendering their own dogs to shelters. "Look at Bruno," Marcus said simply, his hand resting on the dog's head. He was ignored for 9 months because people saw his breed before they saw his heart. But he's the gentlest, most loving creature I've ever known. He's saved lost children, comforted the grieving, and brought joy to everyone he meets. Judge the individual, not the stereotype. The second part of filming took place at the Riverside Animal Shelter, where Bruno's journey had begun. Walking through those familiar corridors brought back memories for both Sarah and Bruno. The dog seemed to remember his time there, but without the sadness and desperation he had carried before. Sarah showed Amanda the kennel where Bruno had spent 9 months waiting for his forever home. The space seemed impossibly small now, considering the large life Bruno had built for himself. Several current residents pressed against their kennel doors, hoping for attention, and Bruno's gentle demeanor with them showed his natural empathy for animals still waiting for their chance. Bruno was one of our longest residents, Sarah explained to the camera. We had almost given up hope of finding him a home. But sometimes the right match is worth waiting for, even when it seems impossible. The most powerful moment of the day came when Amanda asked Marcus to meet some of the current long-term shelter residents. In the play yard, they introduced him to a 7-year-old shepherd mix named Rex, who had been waiting for 5 months, and a gentle senior lab named Honey, who had been surrendered when her elderly owner moved to assisted living. Marcus spent time with both dogs while Bruno supervised approvingly. Watching his human show kindness to other shelter animals seemed to reinforce Bruno's understanding of their shared mission to help those who needed it most. These dogs deserve the same chance Bruno got, Marcus told the camera, scratching Rex behind the ears. They're not broken or unwanted. They're just waiting for someone to see their potential. The news segment aired 3 weeks later during the evening news, and the response was immediate and overwhelming. The shelter received dozens of calls from potential adopters specifically asking about older dogs and Pitbull-type breeds. Rex and Honey both found homes within a week of the broadcast. More significantly, Marcus began receiving calls from other communities wanting Bruno to visit their schools and events. They had unintentionally started a movement, using Bruno's story to challenge breed discrimination and promote shelter adoption. Their first speaking engagement was at a regional animal welfare conference, where Marcus addressed an audience of shelter workers, veterinarians, and animal advocates. Bruno lay quietly beside the podium, occasionally lifting his head when Marcus mentioned his name, serving as a living example of the transformation that was possible with patience and love. Bruno didn't just find a home, Marcus told the audience. He found his purpose, and in helping him discover what he was meant to do, I discovered what I was meant to do too. We became a team dedicated to showing the world that every animal deserves a chance to prove their worth. The speech was met with a standing ovation, but the real impact came in the conversations afterward. Shelter directors shared stories of increased adoptions following local media coverage of Marcus and Bruno's visits. Veterinarians talked about clients who had overcome their breed prejudices after meeting Bruno personally. Dr. Williams, who had traveled from the original shelter to attend the conference, found Marcus afterward with tears in her eyes. I never imagined when I first examined that scared, skinny dog that he would become an ambassador for his entire breed, she said. You've given him the life he deserved, and he's given you a legacy that will help countless other animals. As spring turned to summer, Marcus and Bruno's speaking schedule filled up with school visits, community events, and shelter fundraisers. Each appearance strengthened their bond and reinforced their shared mission. Bruno seemed to understand his role as an educator, always perfectly behaved and endlessly patient with children who wanted to pet him and adults who had questions about his breed. The pinnacle of their advocacy work came when they were invited to speak at the state capitol during hearings on breed-specific legislation. Marcus testified about the importance of judging dogs as individuals rather than condemning entire breeds, with Bruno serving as living proof of his arguments. Legislation should focus on responsible ownership and individual behavior, not breed discrimination, Marcus told the legislative committee. Bruno has saved lives, brought comfort to the grieving, and educated thousands of people about the true nature of Pitbull-type dogs. He couldn't have done any of that if he had been judged solely by his appearance. The bill to ban breed-specific legislation passed by a significant margin, with several legislators specifically mentioning Bruno's story in their supporting statements. It was a victory that would protect countless dogs like Bruno from discrimination based solely on their genetic heritage. On a quiet evening in July, exactly 18 months after Bruno's adoption, Marcus sat in his garden with his faithful companion beside him. The setting sun painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, and the sounds of children playing in the nearby park created a peaceful backdrop to their contemplation. "You know what, Bruno?" Marcus said as he had so many times before. "We've had quite an adventure together." Bruno's response was the same as always, a gentle lean against Marcus's leg and those wise, loving eyes looking up at his human with complete trust and affection. But now their quiet moments carried the satisfaction of knowing they had not only found each other but had used their bond to make the world a little bit better for other animals still waiting for their own second chances. Their story had come full circle, from a lonely man and an overlooked dog to a partnership that inspired communities and changed lives. They had proven that love, patience, and the willingness to look beyond surface appearances could create miracles. Most importantly, they had shown that sometimes the most perfect matches are the ones that seem impossible at first glance. As the stars began to appear in the darkening sky, Marcus reflected on Helen's old wish for a dog. She would have loved Bruno, he knew, but more than that, she would have been proud of what they had accomplished together. They had turned their second chance into hope for thousands of other animals, proving that every ending could also be a beginning, and every rescue was really a story of two lives being saved.